So today we have readings about forgiveness. How about that? Comes up, someone's asking me about confession. I don't know, maybe that person read ahead. But we have some things about forgiveness. And Jesus is telling us in his parable that he taught with Peter, and he says, you are to forgive people 70 times 7. And which to me, if you know anything about numbers in Scripture, 7 just means a lot. Anytime you have 7 or 12, or there's a lot. So he says, do it a lot. The only problem that I have with this scripture is we take it and we put it in a gospel reading and we say, just preach on that part of Matthew. Well, you can't really take scripture out of context. You start missing a little bit about what Jesus was really all about. When you do this passage, Matthew 18, verses 21 through 35, becomes a weapon against those people who are in abusive relationships. You are to forgive your husband for beating you 70 times 7. Isn't that what Jesus said? You are to forgive your spouse for stealing money from your parents 70 times 7. Is that not what Jesus just told us? But we have to rewind a little. When we have sin happening over and over again against us, we have to go back in Matthew and remember what Jesus said and we read last week, where it says, when you have a problem with your friend or with someone that you know, how do you resolve the problem? You first go to them, you try to work it out. That doesn't work, so you bring 2 or 3 friends with you. That doesn't work them out. You bring them to court or to church, and that doesn't work out. What does Jesus tell us to do? Walk away. For you did all that you could do. We cannot forget the beginning parts of Matthew when we talk about Matthew 18, 21 through 35. Yes, we are to forgive one another. But do we go so far as to let it be abusive? Because now you're going against the ultimate sin, the ultimate command that Jesus tells us to love. Because you're not loving yourself enough to walk away. This week it was brought to my attention that I don't forgive and forget. And that really took me back, because the person that directed it at me, I know, was coming from a biblical perspective. And you see, I forgive, but I don't forget. We're never told to forget. For if we forget, we no longer have forgiven. Because you can't forgive that which you don't know. You cannot forget what bad things people have done for you, for it will repeat over and over again, and you are not loving yourself for allowing it to happen. And if you're not loving yourself enough, then you're not loving God enough. You're not really loving your neighbor enough because you're allowing them to sin over and over again by you being in the same place doing the same thing with them. And sometimes that's a little hard to say. And it's a little hard to digest. Yes, we are to forgive. I'm all about forgiving. I'm all about moving forward. I'm not about forgetting, but I'm about, hey, I'm going to lay this aside. We're going to move on in our relationship. We're going to try to make this work again. But then you did it again. And on the second time, I forgave you again, and we're going to try to work it out, but it's still going to be here. Now you did it to me again. Now I'm going to have to bring some people in because we got some problems. We need to bring it to a group of people, and they need to help us out because we're not doing this on our own right. Well, we got through it and we put it aside and we moved on. But you know, that fourth time, yes, I can forgive, but I can surely walk away. Because it's not healthy for me. Because you see, what I strive for in my life is to love. And there comes a time when you can't love somebody to their face anymore. I'm going to be real about it. The only time you can really love them is to walk away. To really see their hurt, their pain, what they're going through. You can't be in the midst of them. You have to be away from them. To truly love them, you have to walk away. I was sitting in services earlier today, and I heard this Romans passage in the last paragraph there, and it was reminded of one of my favorite passages by Paul from Philippians 1, verses 20 and on. It says, "My eager expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed about anything, but that now, as always, with all courage, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." We often think that dying is a bad thing, that dying relationships are bad things, that we failed at something. But you know, if you tried over and over again, and you forgave, and you put it aside, and you did everything that you could possibly do to make it work, and it just didn't, you need to let it die. To truly gain an understanding. It's so difficult to deal with things in life that you just cannot fix. As much as we all want to be in complete control of everything in our lives, it just isn't so. It just is not possible in the creation that God gave us. Because in that creation is that free will that every human being has. And they, as well as you, have to try to figure out how is your free will and my free will going to gel. How do you do what you do and me do what I do going to click? And it's not always going to. And that's okay. It's why we have other countries. It's why we have lots of churches in a little bitty town called Abbeville. It's why 2 different churches meet in one building. Because we don't always gel. We have to be civil with one another. We have to love each other for where they are, for what they are. as it says, welcome those with faith that is weak, and do not argue with them. Recognize the weaknesses in people and don't argue back. But sometimes you have to walk away and say, it's okay not to be friends with everybody, because I'm loving you and myself and God much more by not arguing with you, by not tearing our worlds apart, by dealing with petty issues that we just can't click on. As you may know, the sermon comes very much from a personal experience this week. And it's funny how things happen in that scriptures just so line up right where you need them. I hope that for you, you see where I'm trying to go. But know that God always forgives, even when we screw it up. That God is always right behind us to hold us up and to make sure that we are protected and that we will move forward. So in any tough chances that you have, anything you deal with, know that God is with you. He wants you to do the best you can, but when you just fucked it up, it's all right. Because every time it's another learning time. But remember to forgive in order for us to be forgiven. Just as we say in our confession that we do every week, we say, may we forgive those that have harmed us as you have forgiven us. So may we all know the comfort and the joy of forgiveness, and know that there is no punishment that God could ever give us that can even contest with the disappointment in ourselves. And that when we sin, we disappoint ourselves more than we ever would disappoint God. So know that you are forgiven and that God is always there with you and always protecting you.